Yes, so John asked me to talk a bit about personal productivity and how we can all be more productive in these post-COVID days. Now, I could sit here and talk to you about various productivity hacks, and I want a little bit to start with. But then I'll get into a little bit of science around it as well. So a few things I think that are probably worth us bearing in mind is some of these misnomers about things like multitasking. So apart from Lorna, apparently none of us here can multitask. Um, of course, the actual reality is that nobody can multitask particularly effectively. All it means is you're doing more than one thing less well than you would if you just focused on one thing. So one of the first little tips that I just want to make is just make that time and be in the moment with the thing that you are doing. That's one of the best ways I think that we can be productive. The other thing, and this is something I really tend to find, I'm not sure about you, but the biggest change since COVID is I work in this little room of mine pretty much all day, every day now. Very occasionally I go out and see people, but really not very often. There's a lot of distractions when we work from home. A lot of distractions. Even now, you know, my Zoom isn't on full screen, which it probably should be because I can see stuff behind it. That's a distraction. We have our phones, we have people, we have all of this stuff going on. So the more we can do to block our distractions, I think probably is one of the top tips I can give you. What I want to talk more than anything else about is that, you know, I personally feel the one thing we need to do is to challenge and rethink the idea of the working day if we want to be more effective and more productive. So let me explain what I mean by that. Our bodies have natural ebbs and flows. You probably had that thing, you start the day, you're on a big motivational high. By about 1-2 o'clock in the afternoon, you've crashed and you don't recover from it. So unless you are some sort of superhuman, super productive being, you're going to ride this roller coaster of ebbs and flows in terms of your energy and your focus throughout the day. Because of this, we need to know when to work to make the most of our natural body's ebbs and flows. Now, we're in a world that's been defined by the 9 to 5 or 9 to half 5 working day. But that assumes that our productivity is high at 9 o'clock and will be equally high at 5:30, and all will be fine within that. And that just isn't reality. That's not how human beings work. It's not how our brains work. So wouldn't it be better if instead of fighting against those natural ebbs and flows, we embrace them and we work with them? And this for me is the real key to personal productivity. Now, at the moment, we might not be particularly aware of our natural ebbs and flows, or maybe we are sort of aware of them, but we kind of ignore it because we have our working day that we have to stick to. So if I give my own personal example, Tuesdays are a good productive day for me. And one of the reasons Tuesdays are a good productive day for me is that Jo has to start work at 8 o'clock. She has to be at the hospital by 8 o'clock. So she has to set an early alarm, which inevitably wakes me up. Now, whilst I'm not delighted about that fact, if I get up at that point and get myself my little caffeine hit that starts every day, and then sit down and work, I can have 2 really productive hours there. That seems to be a good energy point of the day for me personally. I realise that wouldn't work for everyone, but this is about recognising our own ebbs and flows and using those in good, effective ways so that we optimise our working time and we increase our productivity in that time when I'm not very productive, which generally, like a lot of people, tends to be around the middle of the day. Well, I've done my work. It doesn't necessarily matter unless someone is demanding that I work at that point. A lot of this stuff, it's out of our own personal control as well. It's worth pointing out, we don't choose the ebbs and flows in our energy. There's lots of stuff going on. And it's not as easy as just deciding, well, be more motivated. I've got a big motivational poster on the wall in front of you. It won't really do anything with it. Let's face it. So the truth is lots and lots of things are going on internally that affect our productivity throughout the day. So it's great when our natural rhythms align with the work we have to do, but that doesn't really just happen naturally that's going to happen in a planned way. So what I'd invite you to think about is we have these sort of productivity curves, ebbs and flows throughout the day. And what we want to try to do is align how we're working with the ebbs and flows, learn to work with our natural peaks and our natural valleys. So get our heads down, really work during our peak energy hours. And when our peak energy hours are not so good, when they're lower, that's the time for us to push back. It's a good time to do meetings, emails, things like that in the low energy time. Do your high stress, high productive stuff during the peak times. And there's good evidence to show that if we do stressful tasks, difficult tasks during our high energy time, that actually just pushes our energy even higher. So a really useful thing to think about. If I think about productivity curves, probably the easiest one to talk about and the one you've probably heard of most often is our circadian rhythms, our 24-hour internal clock that runs in the background, keeps our brain ticking along. It looks a bit like this. Most of you have probably heard of circadian rhythms, so I'm not necessarily going to go through all this, but it is just being aware, yeah, we have these times of the day where typically, as humans, we're at our best for different things. But interestingly, of course, we ignore all this when we put our working day together or our school days together and things like that. The school day for me is one of the most mind-blowing ones. What science tells us is that teenagers, their brains probably start working at their best at about 11 o'clock in the morning and go through until mid-afternoon. And yet the school day starts at 8:30 and runs until early afternoon. Therefore, not making the best of the brain's power. Given we know that, why we ignore it, I have no idea, but we do. So what tends to happen after waking up and breaking out of our sleep inertia, our levels then start to naturally rise. Now, they might rise quicker for some than for others. Mine seem to rise very quickly and dip very quickly afterwards. Generally, most people's post-energy dip happens between 1 and 3 o'clock in the afternoons. So just after lunch break, and we all kind of know this. I think we've all seen this enough. But equally, work doesn't really account for it, or most people's normal working day doesn't account for it. My contention is the post-COVID world is surely giving us all the opportunity to embrace this flexibility. We now know that people can work virtually. We can work at different times throughout the day. Why are we not embracing that far more? The other thing we might want to think about is the ultradian rhythm. I'm not sure whether people have heard of ultradian rhythms. There we are. But it's this idea of we work best in these 90 to 120 minute cycles of alertness. Our rhythms go up and down. So we work best if we take breaks about every 90 minutes. That tends to be how our body goes. We need to break. We need it to refocus, to keep our energy high, to keep our productivity up. And if we try to ignore these things and just plow through, as we so often do, but just bear in mind, we're not going to be working productively during that time. Yes, we can force ourselves on. Yes, we can get some work done, but we're not going to work at our best. And long term, this leads to us feeling burnt out, disinterested, demotivated, and all of these things. So basically, what does all this mean? Well, what it means is we just need to be a bit more strategic about how we plan our days, isn't it? But on another level, this gives us a roadmap, if we choose to use it, for how to be productive. So for everybody, that productive working day is going to look different. It's going to have different periods of peaks and troughs. One of our challenges, of course, is putting that together with the people that we work with. But if we accept that this is how we're wired, because it is, and rather than fighting it, we work with it, that for me is the real key to how we increase productivity, by using the peak times of the day, the peak energy times of the day, in the most efficient ways. So whilst I give you lots of little hacks within that about avoiding multitasking, avoiding distractions, they're all important things. I would argue that the single most important thing is to do your own study into this. Work out when you are at your most productive. Maybe just keep a little record throughout a day for a couple of weeks, and you'll notice those things. It's all about how am I feeling? When am I at my most awake? When am I at my most alert? When do I get most done? And as you start to plot this, you'll work out your own cycles. And then if we're good, if we're sensible, if we're smart about this, we'll work to the rhythms. And that's basically what I wanted to talk about in a nutshell.